I hope everybody's doing wonderful today. I welcome you to another episode of Andrew's Life. This video is going to be about adjusting how to deal with eviction. I mean, there is a lot of people right now during this holiday season, during this cold winter season, that are getting ready or have already lost the roof over their head, lost their home, been evicted. Some of these people, as I speak, are currently out in the streets trying to figure how they're going to survive day to day. You got a lot of people that are living with relatives and friends, trying to figure when they're going to be able to have a place of their own again. But anyways, there's also been the CDC that I'm pretty sure at this point many of you have heard about or read about at least a little bit. And basically the CDC has policies that are supposed to protect people from being evicted at this time due to COVID. However, if you read a little closer, there are stipulations that tenants have to go by in order to get this protection. Like, number one, before you get this protection, number one, you have to have exhausted all possible resources. Like, if you're behind on your rent or whatever, there's some governments that have resources to where you can get so much money to help pay for your rents. So one of the guidelines with CDC is you have to have exhausted those resources. Another guideline is let's say you lost your job and that's the reason why you couldn't pay your rent and you fell behind on your rent in the first place. I mean, there's another stipulation that will basically address, okay, well, what have you done to make it possible for you to pay your rent? I mean, have you got out here and found yourself another job? I mean, what have you done to find yourself another job or something? So there's that stipulation. And then there's a few other stipulations, which off the top of my head, I can't think of exactly what they are. And to be quite frank, they're a little bit, it's a little bit confusing. But anyways, there's a few stipulations that tenants have to follow in order to be protected by the CDC. And there's been a lot of tenants that automatically assumed that the CDC was going to protect them, and then they found out the hard way that no, they're not going to be protected by the CDC because they did not adhere to all the stipulations. So when they look up, the next thing many people who are in this position realize is they got eviction notices hanging on their door or in their mailbox. And they also realize that many of these judges are granting the landlord to evict many of these tenants. I mean, these judges are allowing these landlords to move forward with the eviction. And there's a lot of people that are surprised about that, because once again, they automatically assume that due to COVID and due to some of the protections that the CDC has put in place for tenants, that they were going to get that protection. But they're not getting that protection because they have failed to follow all the stipulations. And depending on what part of the country that you live in, you're not going to get no protection at all. I mean, it's real simple and cut and dry. Either A, you pay your rent, or B, eventually you can look forward to being evicted and kicked out of the property. And that's exactly what's happening to many people in many parts of this country. Many people are looking up, and before they know it, guess what? They've been served with eviction papers. And before they know it, guess what? The sheriff is knocking on their door. And now they have like maybe 15 minutes, give or take, to get all their belongings out of the property before the landlord goes in and changes all the locks. Now, granted, there are a lot of people out here that are generally in a position that's messed up. They lost their job, or they had to take another job that pays significantly less, and now these individuals are no longer able to pay their rents. But then you got tenants that are scumbags, and they're out here playing games. They got the money to pay their rent, they just choose not to. Because once again, they're automatically assuming that the CDC is going to have their back. And many of these scumbags are finding out not so much so. Not so quick. So you got some of these scumbags that are also being evicted and put in the streets, which for those individuals, I don't feel bad for them. So anyways, if you're in a position to where, okay, you lost your job, either A, you're not working nowhere, you're living off of unemployment, or B, you got another job except it pays significantly less than your old job, so you're finding out as you go through your finances that you're no longer able to pay your rents. I mean, basically the best thing that you can do is, call your landlord or write your landlord. Be honest with your landlord and let your landlord know what's going on. Just tell your landlord point blank, listen, I'm not going to be able to continue to pay rent here because I don't have the money because I lost my job, or I got another job, but the pay is significantly lower than what it was before. So I will no longer be able to honor your the rental agreement that we made. And at that point, either one, your landlord might work with you. You can request your landlord to work with you, and they might, or B, they might be like, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about that. And then if that's the case, then the next thing you do is you just tell your landlord, okay, well, give me 30 days and I'll be out of your property. And if you go about it in that manner, most landlords will be okay with that. I mean, yeah, legally they can sue you and do all these other terrible things, but I'm here to let you know that 9 times out, I would say at least 8 times out of 10, if you're 100% honest and upfront with your landlord about not being able to honor your rental agreements, and you pack up all your stuff and you vacate his property within 30 days, and you leave his property in respectful condition, you don't do anything vindictive like keep the water running and then the property floods, you leave it in respectful condition. I mean, I can almost guarantee that if you do that, the landlord is not going to come after you. They're not going to sue you. And they're not going to go through the trouble of putting an eviction on your record. Because at that point, they're going to be happy just to get their property back, to where they can turn around and rent it out to somebody else who will have the proper funding to pay their rent every month. Because most landlords, quite frankly, they got better things to do than to drag you through the legal system and then have to get the sheriffs to force you out of their property, and then they're going to put your name in the books for eviction. I mean, most landlords, especially your smaller mom and papa landlords who only own a handful of properties, they got better things to do than to deal with you. Now, however, if you want to be stupid and you want to have that attitude of, you know what, I'm going to stick it to the man, and you want to have this attitude of entitlement, and you want to be dishonest, you want to be vindictive and all that type of stuff, and you want to leave the water running so his property floods or whatnot. I mean, if you want to act like that, and then you want to sit around and give him a hard time and wait until the sheriff is knocking on the door before you leave, if you want to act stupid like that, then at that point, I would say the majority of your landlords or you're gonna piss them off, and they're gonna go ahead, and their attitude is, since you're giving them a hard time, since they're making their job hard, they're not gonna have a problem with turning around and making your job hard. I mean, making your life hard. I mean, so basically, what will happen in that case is obviously there's going to be an eviction on your record, and if you wreck his property, even though the landlord might already realize that they're not going to be able to get a dime from you because you simply don't got the money. Even if you got the money, they already know you ain't going to pay. But however, they're going to go ahead and take you to court, and then a judgment will be passed against you on the landlord's behalf. And how does that ruin your life? How does that make your life harder? Well, this is how it's going to make your life harder. When you go and you look around for another property to rent, and then you apply to rent another property, the second that landlords see that you have an eviction, they're not going to want to rent to you. So it is going to be a lot harder to rent another house or apartment with an eviction on your record. I mean, there's been a lot of people recently that have reported that once they got evicted from one property, and then maybe a month or 2 or 3 later, once they get their finances in order, they're out here looking for another place to rent. There's a lot of people that report that they're not able to find another place to rent because they have an eviction on their record from the last place that they were renting that they got evicted from. So you do not want to have an eviction on your record. And I feel that it is very easy to avoid having an eviction on your record by doing what I just told you to do, if you're in a position where you're not going to be able to honor your lease agreement. Now, if you damage the property and the landlord decides to sue you, even though you may never have the intentions of paying a dime for whatever reason, you're going to have what's called a judgment on your record. So when it comes time to, maybe one day you might get a little older, be a little more mature or whatnot, you might have a change of how you want to live your life, and maybe one day you might decide, you know what, I want to go buy me a house. Well, guess what? If you got a judgment against you, it is going to be a lot harder for you to be accepted for a mortgage. And also, once again, if you want to rent another property and they see that you have an eviction and a judgment, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to rent anything that's half decent. Now, granted, eventually you will most likely run into a landlord that would be willing to rent to you, even though you have an eviction, even though you might even have a judgment. But the majority of these landlords are going to be slumlords. The properties are going to be in questionable condition. The neighborhood is going to be questionable at very best. And whenever you rent any property like that, like if you get like when you move into the property, and let's say your air conditioning goes out during the summer, or your heat goes out during the winter. Well, guess what? When you report that issue to your landlord, you're going to expect that person to come and address you right away. Some of these slumlords are not going to address you right away. They'll probably take a day or two to address you. So you'll be sitting in your home in the heat during the summer, or in the cold during the winter. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of bull crap that you're going to have to go through in order to get your landlord to do what they're supposed to do for you as a tenant. I mean, at that point, you'll be the one that might have to hire lawyers and stuff like that, and then go after your landlord. Or you'll have to go to the housing authority and report your landlord to the housing authority, and then go through all that bull crap. So really, the best thing that you can do for yourself is, if you know in advance that you're not going to be able to honor your rental agreement, the best thing to do is be 100% honest with your landlord about your situation. Number 2, be respectful to your landlord. Number 3, And number one, be honest. And number two, be respectful. Like, what I mean by respectful is don't cuss them out. Don't cuss your landlord out. And when you leave the property in respectful condition. I mean, don't leave it all messy, full of your garbage. And don't do anything vindictive, like flood out his or her property. I mean, that's the best thing that you can do for yourself to avoid possible evictions on your record, and also to avoid judgment. That way in the future, when you need to go rent something else, or you want to go rent something else, it will be a lot easier for you to do that. Or when that day comes and you want to purchase something and you want to go take out a mortgage, it's going to be a lot easier to do that as well. So I hope this video has helped out somebody out there. Any other ideas that you people might have, leave a comment below, and remember to subscribe to my channel. And until the next time, everybody have a blessed one.